There is a kind of intelligence that does not come from school. It does not come from books. It comes from living in a state where you always had to observe. You walk into a room and immediately feel that something is wrong. Someone replies slower than usual, and your nervous system notices it before your mind can explain why. Someone smiles at you, but their eyes do not smile. Other people call this overthinking, but sometimes it is not overthinking. Sometimes it is the brain of someone who had to learn danger very quickly. That is the dark side of traumatic intelligence. It helps you notice what others miss, but it can also make peace feel suspicious. This video is not saying trauma is a gift, and it is not turning pain into a beautiful superpower. Traumatic intelligence is not a simple compliment. It is an adaptation. When someone grows up around unpredictable emotions, they learn to read the smallest changes just to protect themselves. They learn to hear the shift in a voice, to read silence, to watch the face, to notice hidden anger before it becomes visible, to sense when kindness is slowly becoming control, and to feel when a conversation is no longer connection, but an emotional test. That is the problem. The same skill that once helped you survive can also become the thing that keeps you exhausted. People with traumatic intelligence often do not need someone to say it directly. They feel the shift in the room. The room may still be quiet. People may still be saying normal things, but inside you, a small signal appears. Something is wrong. You notice who is upset. Even when they say, "I'm fine," you notice who is pretending to be calm. You notice when someone is no longer present in the same way. Not because you want to suspect everyone, but because your brain once learned a cold lesson. Danger rarely begins with screaming. It often begins with a small change, a different look, a colder voice, a longer silence, a shorter reply. Other people may ignore these things, but you do not, because in the past, you may have paid the price for ignoring them. That is why you read the room so quickly. Not because you are too sensitive, but because you once had to survive in a place where a small change could mean something bigger was coming. Traumatic intelligence begins when your brain learns to detect danger before danger gives itself a name. One of the clearest signs of traumatic intelligence is that you do not just hear words, you hear the energy behind them. Someone says, "It's fine," but you hear punishment. Someone says, "Do whatever you want," but you hear control. Someone says, "I'm just giving advice," but you hear disrespect. Someone says, "You've changed," but what you really hear is, "You are no longer as easy to control as before." People with traumatic intelligence are often very good at hearing the second layer of a sentence, the part that is never said directly, the part hidden in the tone, in the pause, in the timing, in what is emphasized, and what is left unsaid. But this also comes with a cost. When you hear too much behind people's words, it becomes hard to relax. You do not just hear a sentence. You analyze it. You do not just read a message. You study every word. And sometimes you are right. But sometimes you are reliving an old danger inside a new moment. Traumatic intelligence helps you hear what others hide, but without control. You will start hearing threat even where there is no war. People who have been hurt before usually do not trust sudden warmth right away. When someone is too kind, too fast, you do not only feel comfort, you feel alert. When someone praises you too much, you do not only feel happy. You start wondering, what do they want from me? When someone enters your life too strongly, too quickly, too sweetly, you do not simply get swept away. A part of you begins to observe, because somewhere in your past, you may have learned that kindness can be used like a hook. At first, they were warm, very attentive, very understanding. They made you feel special. But later, that warmth became conditional. They gave you affection, then withdrew it to see if you would chase. They gave you attention, then used silence to control you. They made you get used to the feeling of being chosen, then turned that feeling into something you had to work to keep. So now, When someone is too good too fast, you do not completely relax. You look for the pattern. You watch whether their kindness is stable, whether it respects boundaries, whether it comes with action, or whether it is only the beginning of another control cycle. People with traumatic intelligence are not impressed by fast kindness. They watch whether that kindness still exists when they begin to have boundaries. Some people only want you to remember their good moments. They want you to remember the apology, the soft message, the time they came back and acted like nothing ever happened. But people with traumatic intelligence do not only remember moments, they remember cycles. They remember that before this apology, there was the same kind of hurt. Before this kindness, there was a long stretch of coldness. Before this promise to change, there were many times when everything returned to the same pattern. And that is what makes toxic people uncomfortable, because they prefer people who forget quickly, people who soften after one sweet message, people who let one apology erase their emotional memory. But once you start remembering the pattern, they lose part of their power. You are no longer hypnotized by one beautiful moment. You start asking different questions. Has this really changed? Or is this just another loop? Are they changing their behavior? Or only calming my emotions so I stay? A beautiful apology means nothing if the pattern is still alive. This is the part most people do not talk about. Traumatic intelligence does not only make you deeper, it can also make you tired. You read too much, feel too quickly, analyze too deeply. You walk into a normal conversation, but your body is already preparing for an attack. Someone gives a short reply, and you think something is wrong. Someone stays silent, and you wonder what you did. Someone changes their tone, and your whole day gets pulled into analysis. This is where traumatic intelligence begins to turn into anxiety. You are no longer observing to understand. You are observing to survive. You are no longer just noticing patterns. You are searching for patterns everywhere. You are no longer only protecting yourself. You begin living as if anyone could hurt you at any moment. And that steals your freedom, because a brain that is always watching can never truly rest. A heart that is always preparing to be abandoned can never receive love peacefully. And a person who is always reading danger can forget how to recognize safety. That is the dark side of traumatic intelligence. You can become so good at detecting danger that you no longer know when you are finally safe. So, what do you do with this kind of intelligence? You do not need to hate it, but you also should not let it control your entire life. The first step is to separate two things: a real pattern and an old reaction. A real pattern is something that happens again and again. An old reaction is what your body creates because it once had to survive something painful. If someone keeps becoming cold, keeps manipulating, keeps promising change, then returning to the same behavior, that is a pattern. But if someone replies slowly one time and your whole body immediately panics, that may be an old reaction. The second step is this: do not act while your nervous system is in alarm. When you want to send another message, explain more, apologize again, or disappear immediately. Pause. Ask yourself, am I responding to what is happening now, or am I responding to an old wound? The third step is to use your awareness for boundaries, not for self-torture. If you see a harmful pattern, do not analyze it forever. Set a boundary. Reduce access. Use shorter words. Watch actions, not just promises. Traumatic intelligence becomes power only when it brings you back to clarity, not when it pulls you deeper into panic. The goal is not to stop reading people. The goal is to read clearly, without losing your own peace. If you have traumatic intelligence, maybe you are not too sensitive. Maybe you once had to learn how to read people, so you would not be hurt again. You learned to hear silence, to read the eyes, to feel distance, to notice when someone changes, not because you wanted to distrust everyone, but because at some point, that was how you protected yourself. But now, the lesson is not to become colder. The The lesson is to become clearer. Do not let the past turn every person into a threat. But do not let fake kindness make you forget a real pattern. Observe, but do not obsess. Trust your intuition, but test it through repeated actions. Protect yourself, but do not lock your heart away from everything good. Because traumatic intelligence becomes real power only when it helps you live calmer, clearer, and freer. If this video touched something in you, subscribe to Unseen Psychology. Not to suspect everyone, but to understand people more deeply. Read patterns more clearly, build better boundaries, and protect your peace. Comment one word below: alert, silence, patterns, or trust. Which one controls your mind the most? And remember this: you are not crazy for noticing what others miss. But healing begins when the part of you that learned to read danger finally learns how to recognize peace.